This podcast is associated with Inland Caregiver Resource Center located in Colton, California. We bring to you, our listeners, a new way to help families and communities cope with and manage the challenges of caregiving. ICRC has provided assistance with caregiving since 1985 and is a part of 11 statewide resource centers. We bring to you the second episode of Inland Caregivers Corner. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Inland Caregivers Corner podcast. I'm your host, Derek Chacon, a care coordinator with ICRC, and I'm excited for this month's episode. The guest I have today is someone who has had over 30 years of experience in senior healthcare. She's currently an outreach and education coordinator with ICRC. She facilitates and co-facilitates ICRC support groups. You can find her Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon on Facebook Live at facebook.com/ICRC 1985. She is a published author of 3 books, From Darkness into Light, The Complete Resource Guide for Baby Boomers, and The Complete Resource Guide for Baby Boomers, 2nd edition. She's a mother of 3 grown boys and grandmother to 2 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. I hope you enjoy the conversation I had with the encouraging, insightful, and talented Darlene Merkler. Check it out. Hi, Darlene. Welcome to the Inland Caregiver Corner podcast.
Derek,
How are
thanks
you
for
doing?
having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Good. So I know we had a quick conversation last week sometime, and we were talking about how you got started in senior healthcare. You have is it over 30 years of experience, or is it just hitting 30 years of experience?
It's a little bit over, actually.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So how did you start working in senior healthcare, and how did you get to be employed with ICRC? How did that start up?
Well, I was living in Maryland at the time, and I have, for all of my career, been in sales and marketing. And so I was working for a small cable station in Maryland, in the town that I lived in Maryland at the time. And I was writing and selling commercials for them. So a new adult daycare center opened in the town where I lived. So I went to them and did a presentation to see if they would do a commercial. And it's important to note that at the time I was calling on them, I was reading the book, The Celestine Prophecy. And so about a week later, they called me and said, we were really impressed with your presentation, and our marketing person is moving to a different office. So we were wondering if you might be interested in the marketing and admissions position here. And I just started laughing because I said, I don't know anything about seniors. And they said, well, think about it. Well, they wound up calling me 3 times. And the 3rd time I got to thinking about it, actually after the 2nd phone call, I thought, I need to pay attention to what the book is telling me. The book is a fiction story, but it basically, the gist, what I got out of it was to pay attention to what happens in the peripheral. You shouldn't go through life with blinders on, so focused on your goal that you don't pay attention to what happens in the peripheral. So I thought, I need to pay attention to this. So I'm going to go for the interview, which I did, and got the job and found out that it was my passion, working with the families and the seniors, and I just loved it. And so I worked there for a few years, and then from there I started doing admissions for the one nursing home that we had in our town. I did that for a couple years, and then I helped a large continuing care retirement community do a startup and did their admissions for their assisted living for a few years. And then I went to work for an Alzheimer's assisted living. And that's how I got to California. In 2004, I transferred with the Alzheimer's assisted living community to Redlands, California. I'd never heard of Redlands. and probably would never have known about it if it wouldn't have been for that transfer. I worked for them for a few years, and then they got bought by a big corporation, and I didn't want to go through a buyout. So I started my own consulting business and did that for 10 years, mostly helping families with placement is what I was doing. And then in 2016, my daughter-in-law passed away. So I went to North Carolina for a year and a half to help my son with my grandson. And I really missed my career and all my friends and California. So I came back in 2018 and took a job with a hospice company at the time, but I knew that wasn't really where I wanted to be. And it was really on my mind about getting a program into San Bernardino County called Care Pathway.
How you came from sales and marketing to ICRC, I feel is really interesting, especially for our listeners who may not know about you. One thing I did want to plug in was the book, is it Centurion Prophecy?
Celestine.
Celestine.
Prophecy.
Celestine Prophecy. So the Celestine Prophecy, I read a little synopsis on the book. One thing that stood out was it talked about synchronicity and how things happen for a reason, and you meet certain people for a reason. It really seems like that that was the start of your story. Is you meet this person, and then you suddenly start going into this field, and then you've excelled in it for 30 plus years. So after you started with helping families, was it with placement or?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I went to North Carolina to help my son with my grandson. And then in 2018, I came back to Redlands and took a job with a hospice company. But for 5 years before I went to North Carolina, I was working with Riverside County Office on Aging, who received a grant, and they needed to develop a program for family caregivers. So Mary Rinko at the Office on Aging wrote that grant and asked me to help her develop that program, which I did. And it ended up being a 12-week class called Care Pathways. And family caregivers would meet for 2 hours, 1 day a week for 12 weeks. And the grant would provide care in the home for their loved one and paid for all the materials for the class and everything. And that was a wonderful class, and I was really enjoying that and hated to leave to go to North Carolina, but I needed to. So when I came back, it was just heavy on my mind about getting Care Pathways into San Bernardino County, because the grant was a grant through Riverside County Mental Health, so only people who lived in Riverside could take the program. And I always felt that San Bernardino County is bigger. They're not as wealthy as Riverside County. And I think there's a lot more caregivers who need that program.
Absolutely.
And so
having that assistance in San Bernardino County is definitely needed. And for myself, being a resident here, you do see a lot of people who could benefit from the Care Pathways program. I know myself, I get some feedback on it stating that people love the program. As you said, mostly in Riverside County, but they enjoy it a lot. They find it very beneficial with a ton of information. So that's great. I had no idea that you started Care Pathways. That's great.
Mary and I wrote all of the curriculum for the class, and I taught the class for 5 years. And so I saw from week 1 to week 12 the transformation in the caregivers because of that class. And so I really wanted to see that happen in San Bernardino County. And I kept trying to think about how it could happen and how we could get a grant. And then when I was thinking about grants, I thought about Inland Caregiver Resource Center. So I had known Carmen for 16 years. I used to serve on the board of directors for Inland Caregiver. And I contacted her and I told her my idea. And at the time that I met with her, Inland Caregiver Resource Center had just received a grant from the state. And she got this big smile on her face and said, "You couldn't have come to me at a better time because we have this grant and we're looking for ways to help caregivers with the grant." So Carmen and I met with Mary Rinko, and we've started that process of hopefully bringing care pathways into San Bernardino County.
Awesome.
And so when I had picked Carmen up to go to that meeting with Mary Rinko, and on the way back, Carmen said, "Well, in the meantime, while we're getting this started, would you be interested in teaching some other classes for Inland Caregiver?" And I said, "Yes, I would," because I really knew that the hospice industry wasn't where I wanted to be. And so she wanted me to work 40 hours. I started out at 20, then I went to 30. Now I'm at 40. So anyway, I started out teaching some of your classes that have already been developed, and also running an evening support group, which you guys hadn't had before. And then she asked me if I would be interested in developing a class based on a book that I had just written, which is the Complete Resource Guide for Baby Boomers, the second edition. It was published last December 2019. And it's all updated information. It's actually a compilation of 25 chapters, and each chapter is written by an expert in their field. And the reason I wrote the first edition of the book is because working with families over the years, I was getting the same questions. What's the difference between Medicare and Medi-Cal? What's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? How do you pay for these services? And all those kinds of questions. And so I don't know that I know the answers to those questions, but I don't feel like I'm an expert in each one of those fields. But I know a lot of people in the Inland Empire who are. So the Alzheimer's Association wrote a chapter, an elder law attorney wrote a chapter, and so forth. And so an expert wrote the chapter on each topic. So Carmen asked, could I develop a class on that, which I did. And it's an 8-week class. It will start in January. Caregivers will meet for 2 hours, 1 day a week for 8 weeks. And at the end of the class, they will receive the book.
That's awesome. As you said, I get those same questions all the time. Like you said, the big one that stood out was, what's the difference between Medicare and Medi-Cal? So I get that question a lot. And then I also get information on placement and things like that. So with that guide, it's extremely beneficial. I'm very happy that we have it in the office for reference. And then to know that that you're going to be starting an 8-week class. That's going to be awesome, definitely for our clients and caregivers.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited about it. The first class is called Taking Care of Yourself Through the Caregiving Process. And actually, that chapter in the book was written by David Frazier, who used to be the director of Inland Caregiver Resource Center. Actually, when I was on the board, he was the director. And
Nice.
so he wrote that chapter, and it's actually the last chapter in the book, but I wanted to start the class with that chapter to help caregivers understand why they're taking this class and why this information that we're going to cover is important. So I'm excited for it to start in January.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. So I know you went over a little bit of the information that you're going to be covering on the 8-week class. What do you feel would benefit the caregiver from attending that class or reading your book?
Well, I think the topics in the class are topics that we haven't covered in other classes at Inland Caregiver Resource Center. As you know, Derek, we have a lot of clients who continually take our classes. I mean, we offer 8 workshops every month, and I see a lot of the same faces every month. And so to add, the workshops are one thing, but then this class will be part of our core education that we do. And I also see that people are repeating those classes as well. So I think caregivers are hungry for information on how to be a better caregiver. And some of the other topics that we'll be covering, for instance, the second week will be planning for the unknown, which is the name of the class actually. And it talks about pre-planning for funeral arrangements, reverse mortgages, finances, and insurance, which are interesting topics for family caregivers because there's a lot of good information in there about how to pay for things, how to be prepared ahead of time, and things like that. And then the third week will be the chapter that I wrote, which is care options. It will be the different levels of care. When is it time for each level? How does a person qualify for each one of those levels? How much does it cost? How do you pay for it? Things like that. And then the fourth class will actually get into Medicare and Medi-Cal. And then the fifth class is mental health and vascular disease in the elderly. And that is a new chapter in the book in the second edition because I didn't even talk about mental health in the first edition of the book, which I think is a really important topic and something that's overlooked in the elderly.
Absolutely.
And then yeah, I know you're a big proponent for that.
Definitely, that's exactly what I was gonna
Uh,
say. Is I'm a big advocate for mental health and ensuring that people are aware of their mental health and that it's okay to ask for assistance if you're feeling that maybe there is effect in your thoughts and gaining that encouragement. I guess I want to say I want to encourage those who are questioning their mental health to definitely speak to someone because it is beneficial, and also gaining that knowledge of mental health that's available in your book can also be really beneficial for seniors and caregivers, for everyone, honestly.
Absolutely. And when I first started in the industry 30 years ago, it was thought that Alzheimer's disease was mental health issue. Many patients in the very beginning of when Alzheimer's was first discovered were put into a mental health institution. They didn't understand the disease. So I think mental health is a good topic. The mental health chapter in the book is written by a local psychiatrist who works with seniors. And then the vascular disease in the elderly, that chapter was written by a neurosurgeon. So those will be really two good topics. And then the sixth week, we're going to talk about geriatric care management and family consultations, and also caring from a distance. And then the seventh week, we're going to talk about, it's called retirement. We're going to talk about how and when to sell your house, how to downsize. And then we end up with conflict resolution, which I think is a good way to end the class.
Nice.
Because I know if you're a caregiver, you know about conflict.
Yeah,
There's conflict, it seems.
definitely. So when does that begin again?
The first class will be January 6th, and it'll be 1 to 3. So it'll be every Wednesday for 8 weeks, starting January 6th from 1 to 3. And we will be posting that on our Facebook page. And if you're a client of Inland Caregiver Resource Center, you'll receive information on how to register for that class by email. We'll also have links and options on our social media too.
That's
But they
awesome.
can also call our office. If anybody's interested, they can always call our office to register.
I was going to say they could check out our new website. That's all been redone. Really awesome looking and easy to navigate. I think a lot easier than our previous website. I'm sure that information will be on there as well for those who are interested and want to register or just gain more information. Maybe share the information to a friend or neighbor. So working with outreach and education, you've been an outreach and education coordinator since
About a year, just about a
just about a
year.
year. In within the year that you've had, what would you say is beneficial about attending these education workshops? Or I know that we can catch you on Facebook Live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. what would you say is beneficial for clients or caregivers who would watch that and listen in on your Facebook Live?
Well, the Facebook Live, I really enjoyed. The first 2 times I did, it was terrible. I was
I
saying to
doubt it.
somebody the other day, I never thought at age 70 I'd be so tech savvy, but I had never done Facebook Live before. And so the first 2 were a little rough, but I've been doing it twice a week since March. So I'm getting a little better at it. And the good thing, before I forget, is if they don't catch it on Facebook Live right at noon, we're uploading all of those 15-minute videos to our YouTube station, which is Inland Caregiver Resource Center. So I like that because, like, I had a caregiver in my support group the other day say, I can't sleep at night. What information is on the internet? And I said, well, you can go to our YouTube, pick out any topic you want, and view a little 15-minute video in the middle of the night, if you want to. So I love that.
That's awesome.
But the 15-minute videos are really great because they're not really long. Basically what I use is the information from our workshops and our educational classes, but I just condense it down into 15 minutes and give the highlights. And then if people want more information, they can always take the 1.5-hour workshop, or we have the core classes that I mentioned earlier that are anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks long. So if they want more information, but what I think people benefit from attending the workshops, the caregivers, what I hear from the caregivers is they love sharing with the other caregivers in the group. And of course, we've been virtual since March, so we're doing this on Zoom. And I'm so proud of all of our caregivers because they're tech savvy too. They're getting on
Yeah,
Zoom. And I think our support groups have been well attended. And I think it's great because they don't have to drive somewhere. They don't have to get a sitter for their loved one while they're in the class. Although we do provide care in the home, even though they're just on Zoom, because as a caregiver, sometimes you can't have that quiet time for an hour and a half to be on Zoom, so,
yeah,
but I think the caregiver really they enjoy the information from the workshop. And of course, I always say knowledge is power. And the more information you can have, the more effective you can be as a caregiver. And I love that all of our clients are so open to new information and they're hungry to learn new things so that they can do a better job. But I think the big thing that they really enjoy in the workshops and, of course, the support groups is the interaction with the other caregivers and how they
absolutely.
support each other. Beautiful. This is really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites is definitely building community, and so it's nice to hear that even virtually, when we can't, be with our support system or community. And the reason I say support system is because just caregivers and support groups, they're always there, supporting each other emotionally, and before this, it was sometimes physically. So it's great to hear that they're still building community even when they're not right next to each other in a group. That's great to me. That
I'm sure they would really love to meet in person. They would prefer that. But it's great that we have this resource for caregivers because caregivers have always been isolated. But since COVID, they've become even more isolated. And what I see from our caregivers at Inland Caregiver Resource Center is they're very protective of the person they're taking care of, which they should be. They don't want people coming in the home because they're afraid of exposing their elderly loved one to COVID. They themselves don't even want to go out in the community because they're afraid of bringing COVID in the home. So I see some caregivers getting burned out, and these resources can be helpful to avoid that.
caregiver burnout is a big issue, especially with caregiving. I've only been in social service providing and with ICRC for a year. Within that year, just to hear all our different clients talk about, it's a very selfless thing to be a caregiver. Not having that self-care, in turn, they burn out. They do, because they're focusing so much on their loved one, as you know, as they should. But I mean, it's really ensuring that that person is comfortable and taken care of, and then the caregiver just maintains. They just have the maintenance. Um, with self-care, what would you feel is most important about self-care and education? Because from hearing you, you're a big advocate for education and knowledge. What would you say is the most important part of caregiving? Is it self-care, education, or both?
I think they're both important. One of the things that most caregivers have trouble with is understanding that them taking care of themselves is not selfish. It helps them to be a better caregiver. And I think that the caregivers who attend our workshops on an ongoing basis and who attend a support group, they understand that. But once in a while, we'll have a new person in the workshop, and you can tell they don't grasp that concept. They think that by taking time for themselves, that's selfish, and that they um, well, they're not being a good caregiver if they take a day off or if they have a caregiver come in the home and help them. And as you become more educated about caregiving, you understand that more. And the other caregivers, that's one way that they really help new people who've come into the groups to understand that it's helped them a lot. And I just finished teaching the Powerful Tools class, which is a 6-week class.
Mhm.
And that gives a lot of tools for being a better caregiver. And some people in that class have taken that class 2 or 3 times because each time they've taken it, or what they shared with us was each time they took it, their caregiving situation had changed a little. And so they got something different out of the class.
To go ahead and have a class that's that beneficial that people want to take it, more than once. That's awesome. And also too, that you said it does change, the caregiving situation does change. Um, and I think it's great that you stated, it's okay to take another class, take it twice. These classes are there for you to benefit from. So that is great. A caregiver can go ahead and take our class and also gain something different from it each time. Facebook Live, that's been new. It has been new for you as well. I wanted to ask, is there a favorite that you would recommend to somebody who maybe hasn't seen a Facebook Live yet, or hasn't friended us on Facebook, which they should? Shameless plug.
I know. If they friend us on Facebook, then they'll get notified at noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They'll get a little flash like I do on my phone. Facebook Live is happening now with ICRC. The one that I guess it's the one I enjoy giving the most, and it seems like we got the most views. There's actually two. One was, and it was a class that I had developed before I came to ICRC. It's called "Is It Normal Aging or Dementia?" And it talks about the different stages of Alzheimer's disease, and it also talks about how a caregiver can react to certain behaviors that would be more effective. So if a person is agitated, how you should react to that. And so really concrete tools that caregivers can use. But guess what, Derek, the one that we got the most views on, and it was over 1,000 views,
Wow.
was on Parkinson's disease. And
Nice.
I think it might be, yeah, I think it might be because there isn't a lot of information out there on Parkinson's disease.
Yeah,
And we do actually have quite a few caregivers who are dealing with that. As a matter of fact, I co-facilitate a support group with Jennifer Navarro that is for people who are caring for someone with Parkinson's.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I know
And
that's
that and
been going on for a while.
sometimes they have their care receiver in the support group with them.
How's that been? How's that been working out as far as the caregiver and care receiver inside the group?
It's been really great. As a matter of fact, one client in particular, the person with the disease talks more than the caregiver, and she understands her disease and she wants to learn more, and she's there for support. So
That's
Should we talk
awesome.
about, since we're talking about support groups, should we talk about the 4 new support groups that we're adding in January?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's get that information
I'm
out there.
excited. I'm excited about it. We already have 9 family caregiver support groups, and they're all different days of the week, all different times of the day, including evening. And now that they're virtual, you can attend as many as you want. So you don't have to just go to one. We're starting 4 new ones. One is for family caregivers who are taking care of someone with traumatic brain injury. One is a men's support group. I've had men in my support groups, and I know they've been requesting it for a while to have a men's support group. I think men's needs are a little different than women, and
Very.
what they're experiencing, as far as caregiving, I really think their needs are a lot different. So
Yeah.
that's going to be exciting. And a men's support group. And then also a support group for people who are in the sandwich generation. So there are a lot of
Nice.
caregivers are caring for an elderly loved one, but they still may have children at home, or maybe adult children moved back home or going to college, and the caregiver is sandwiched between the two. Their needs are very different too. So
Yeah.
it will be great to have a support group for just that group.
It
Go
seems
ahead.
that the sandwich generation is coming up now, to where a lot of older caregivers are suddenly in need of caregivers, and so now their children are, as you said, taking care of them, and they're becoming caregivers now, and that seems a lot more common.
Exactly. And the fourth one is the one I'm going to facilitate, and I'm excited about it since I've worked in assisted living most of my career. It is for family caregivers who have already placed their loved one. And so I'm
Nice.
very excited about that, because especially with COVID right now, there are strict protocols in place and guidelines that assisted living communities need to follow. And I think it's important for people to understand what they are. And also, if they have a loved one in a care facility, that they know what their rights are as the family member and what the rights of their loved one in the facility is. And
Absolutely.
I'm excited about that one, because I know quite a few people have not placed their loved one during COVID, because for a while assisted living weren't taking any admissions,
Mhm.
but they are quarantining new people that come in the building. Even if they have a resident that currently lives there and they go out to the hospital and come back, they have to be quarantined. The staff has to have their temperature taken every day. They have to have a COVID test every month. There are a lot of things in place to protect the residents and the family members. So I think that'll be an interesting group.
Yeah, absolutely. With the whole COVID-19 pandemic and things like that, that is definitely beneficial information, because I know, just speaking for myself, that's something that I have no idea about, what to even look for, because this is all new. The COVID-19 pandemic. I've never been in a pandemic, so this is all new information to me, especially with the stress of having to place a loved one, not having to, but um, having to, because it's beneficial to the loved one. Knowing that all that information would be a lot more comforting to me, so that way I would feel a lot more comfort in knowing that they're getting the best care and they're being protected as well in that facility.
Right. Also, I've been very curious about the COVID guidelines for in-home care,
Mhm.
because I hear a lot of our caregivers saying, I don't want to bring a caregiver in the home because I'm afraid they're going to bring COVID in. And I have found by talking to some home care companies, it's probably safer now than it ever has been, because of all the equipment, protective equipment that the home care workers have to wear. And they have the similar guidelines as assisted living, where they have to have their temperatures taken and the COVID testing done, and wear gloves and masks and gowns and booties and everything. Yeah, so
Yes.
actually, I'm working on our February workshops, and we're going to have two guest speakers. One is going to be talking about COVID guidelines and assisted living, and another person is going to be talking about COVID guidelines for home care.
Nice. That's comforting, especially with myself providing assistance with aides going into the home. Of course, I want to ensure that my clients are safe, and so to hear that and to hear those to hear your opinion in that it's the safest it's ever been, considering your experience, that is comforting.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. We're going to have all of those support groups coming up.
That's awesome. How have you been during the pandemic, considering, talking about COVID-19? How has everything been with yourself as far as working from home, things like that, those changes? How have you been?
Working from home, and I've been fine. I'm very healthy. I'm very thankful for all of the measures that Inland Caregiver Resource Center has taken to set us up at home, HIPAA compliant. And that I know that's been a tough job for our operations manager and IT department and all of that. But I love working from home, but it does get lonely. I live alone.
Mhm.
And so I was telling you earlier that I got a dog during the pandemic, because a puppy, because it was just so lonely. And one of our other employees had puppies, and of course, I saw pictures and fell in love right away. And so
Oh,
I have a little puppy that has been keeping me busy and also giving me lots of love and keeping me company.
that's awesome. I'm glad to hear. I know I have my cats, I have my kids and wife, family. So it's yeah, we're pushing through it. That's really all you can do is just adapt and do what you can to stay safe and stay healthy, which is the most important part of all this. Just stay healthy
Yeah.
and do what you can to stay healthy. Thank you so much for just your insight and encouragement and just all that you do for ICRC. Um, I feel we're definitely privileged to have you. And so I just wanted to say thank you. And also thank you for being a guest on Inland Caregivers Corner. I'm very happy to have you. I was really excited for this podcast after our first conversation, which really was kind of our first conversation because we had met and then it was a few weeks and then we all went home. So I really didn't get to know you or have a great conversation with you, but after that first one I was like, oh man, she is awesome and has a ton of encouragement and knowledge to share. So I'm really happy and thankful that Education and Outreach has you on their team to assist our clients and caregivers.
Well, I appreciate being on and sharing information, and I feel privileged myself to be part of ICRC. I've worked with them since I've been in California since 2004 for 16 years, and I know what a great job they do, and it's really my privilege to be part of the team now. Great team, Derek, over there.
We do, absolutely. I always like to end with just for those who have listened to us and have listened to the first episode and continued on to the second. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you so much for listening. I like to go ahead and ask folks who guest on the podcast if there's any encouraging words for our listeners, caregivers, seniors, anyone like to
I
encourage, I
think
guess.
a lot of people, not enough people know about Inland Caregiver Resource Center. And so if you do know about us, which you obviously do, you're listening to the podcast, please share the information because we have so many free resources for caregivers. And I think it's so fun to see a new person come into a workshop or a support group and they're like, I had no idea you guys were out there and what you did, and offering free care, counseling, the Pearls program and the workshops and class, everything that we do, they had no idea. So I would encourage anybody who knows about Inland Caregiver Resource Center to share that information with other family caregivers and like us on Facebook so that that helps us to grow and get the word out to people also. And we're also on Instagram.
Yes, please. We have a ton of information, a ton of people willing and ready to help you. If you are interested in services for caregivers or seniors, you can always reach us at inlandcaregivers.org. There's going to be a ton of information on there. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Inland Caregivers Corner. I greatly appreciate it and look forward to next time because I would love to have you on again.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Bye.
Bye. All right. Thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of Inland Caregivers Corner podcast. I hope you, the listener, gained information that will assist you on your caregiving journey. If this is your first time listening to Inland Caregivers Corner, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I hope you'll join us again next month where we speak with another employee from ICRC and continue to provide information on services and resources that can benefit our listeners. I also would like to apologize for the echo on this episode and the cat meow in the intro. Recording remotely, you may catch some extra noises from my household. If you, your neighbor, a friend, relative, or colleague are in need of resources with caregiving, please contact Ellen Caregiver Resource Center at 800 675 6694 or send us a friend request on Facebook at facebook.com/ICRC1985. You can follow us on Instagram at Inland Caregiver. So that's at INLANDCAREGIVER. And of course, visit our website at www.inlandcaregivers.org. Keep listening to Inland Caregivers Corner for information and resources as we continue to master the challenges of caregiving. I'm Derek Chacon, and continue to take care of yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Take care.